What's up YouTube, this is Demkeys back again with another Unity tutorial, and today I will be teaching you about lens flare. Lens flares simulate the effect of lights refracting inside camera lens. They are used to represent bright lights or more subtly just to add a bit of atmosphere to your scene. So let's begin. What we have here is a terrain with some trees and a first person controller. I've also added a directional light. We will be using this as well in our lens flare example. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a point light. Oh, before we continue, I forgot to mention this. In order to use lens flare, you have to have uh, this light flares package imported, unless of course you're making your own lens flare, then you don't need this package. Okay, so we have our point light here. There are two ways, just like halos, there are two ways of adding flares to a light source. One is you directly select the flare from here. In my case, it's just these three. I'm going to use small flare. And the other method is, just a minute, select none. Okay, you click add component, effects, lens flare, and then in this component you select the flare and you have a lens flare. The difference here would be that you have more options for customizing the flare, like brightness. You can see the effect over here. Also the fade speed. What is fade speed? Fade speed is basically how fast the flare will fade out when it's out of the camera's view, or fade in uh, when it comes into the camera's view. Let me show you how this works. Currently it's 3, so it fades really fast, like barely noticeable. I'm going to change this value to 0.05. Now watch the flare. It fades slowly, not very fast. You can play with this value as much as you want and achieve the desired fading effect. I'm going to change this back to 3. You can also select what color you want the fade to be, what color you want the flare to be. I'm not going to select it over here. I'm going to set it directly in the flare's properties. We'll get to that shortly. Ignore layers. Flares are blocked by colliders. So if you have an object that is in front of the flare and that object has a collider, the flare is going to get blocked. If you want the flare to still be shown, then you can set one of, first of all you have to select which layer you want to ignore, and then you have to go to the object with the collider that's blocking your flare, and you can set that object's layer to whatever layer you have selected here. So that's going to tell the component that the lens flare can actually go through the collider. Let me show you an example. Let me increase this brightness a little bit and place a sphere right at the center of the flare. So take it as a light bulb. As you can see, the flare has been blocked out. Okay, before we continue, let me make this light a child of the sphere and change all these values to 0, so it'll be at the center of the sphere. Alright, so in our lens flare component, transparent effects and ignore raycast, these two layers have been selected, so the lens flare is going to ignore these two layers. So what I need to do is select sphere and select transparent effects layer, and then the flare will go through the sphere. Next, directional. This tells us whether the lens flare is directional or not. This property will help you in cases where you want, say for example, the sun. Let me add a skybox first. Alright, now it's shown in the game view but it's not shown in the scene view. That's normal, that's how the skybox should be here, but if you want it to be shown in the scene view as well, you can select edit, render settings, and select which skybox material should be used. Now this is where the sun is, so we want to add a really bright flare so we are not able to look at the sun. Kind of, well, you get the point. So first I'm going to create an empty object, place this anywhere, and call this sun flare container. Then I'm going to add a lens flare component and select the sun flare. Now you can see this over here because we have not selected directional. Watch what happens when I check directional. It looks as if it has disappeared. It hasn't. It's actually gone over there. Now at this point it looks as if this flare is infinitely far. Now what we need to do is rotate the flare until it reaches the sun. Okay, let me see if I can get this right. Okay, so now the flare is basically masking the sun. Let's play the game and see if the flare does actually affect. As you can see, the flare is working and the sun is quite bright. We can change this value. We can change the brightness value and make it even more bright. Okay, that's that's a little high, but you get the point. Alright, next let's see how to change the values of the flare itself. Let's select small flare. Alright, so within this flare object you have a couple of different properties. First of all, flare texture. This is a texture that you have made. It's a texture with a couple of different textures inside it, which you have made so that they can be used within your flare component or within your flare object. Well, within your flare. Let me show you what star flare looks like. Here it is. Now, if you notice, this is this star. How do I show it to you? Okay, just a minute. Okay, I'm going to remove the lens flare component and select small flare from here. Alright, so this flare has only two elements, as you can see in over here. It's got element 0 and element 1. Element 0 is this cross kind of thing that you see, and whatever you see around it, that is element 1. You can change that. You can set this to 1 or 0, and set this to 3 or 4, whatever. Let me change that back. This was actually the original value of image index, but before the recording I was messing around with the values and I guess I forgot to change that. Okay, so within element 0 we have a couple of more properties. Image index. Using this you can select flares or textures, sorry, you can select textures from the texture sheet that you have provided. So it says 0 over here. Let me show you this thing again. So you can count it like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the reason why you see such a small flare over here, and when I typed 2 in this image index, a very small flare came, or a very small whatever, that small thing was shown. If I type 4, then the bigger one is shown. That's this, and this is at position 0, so that is why when 0 is selected here you can see the cross kind of thing. You can also select what position it has to be at, so I can actually add many more elements to this array. Let me change that back. Next you have size. This should be quite obvious. Next, color. You can change the color of the cross. I guess I should call it star. Okay, anyways. Next, use light color. This decides whether the flare element is going to use its own color or use the color of the light source. Next, rotate. Now to demonstrate rotate, I will have to show you how it works. Watch as I move the camera around. You can notice this. Let me play the game and show you. Pay attention to the star. As you can see, it's rotating. This can be used for many different effects as well. So that's what rotate does. Now zoom. Alright, now I cannot explain zoom properly because I haven't been able to understand what exactly it does. I tried a couple of different things based on the definition given by Unity's website, but I just haven't noticed any change in it. In most cases, it just becomes bigger. That's it. But yeah, here's Unity's definition. If enabled, the element will scale up when it becomes visible and scale down again when it isn't. Moving on. Fade. This you already know, we played with the fade speed. Basically, if this is not enabled, then it won't fade, it'll just disappear. Notice. Just disappearing. Okay, next use fog. If enabled, the flare will fade away with distance fog. This is used commonly for small flares, and we are currently using a small flare. So let me add some fog to this scene and let's see how it works. So as you can see, the fog is actually covering up the flare. Let's see what happens when I uncheck use fog. The flare is still visible even though we have so much fog that we cannot see the trees' colors and we cannot see the grass on the terrain. So that is what use fog does. Okay, let's add another element just to show you how customizable this is. Before that, let me disable the fog. Okay, so it says here size 2. That means element 0 and element 1. If I change it to size 3, we get another element over here called element 2. Let me change this image index to say 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's use 2 and increase its size a little bit. and also change its color. Disable this and now change its color to purple. Or whatever this is. I don't know, purple, violet, magenta. Okay, now I'll uncheck use light color over here and change this color to, okay, the color is too light. Yeah, you can see the effect over here. You have the small flare element with this color, and then you have the bigger flare element with this color. We can also change the star's value, sorry, the star's color to, let's give it, I don't know what color this is, but okay, I don't think you'll be able to notice. Yeah, you can kind of notice it. So yeah, this is how you can customize the flare. Let me change all of this back. Okay. Yes, I forgot to tell you about texture layout. You can select based on the design of your uh, texture sheet. You can select what kind of layout it's supposed to have. Let me tell you exactly what these mean. Now, one large, four small basically means that you have one large texture and four small textures. Just like this layout, one large and four small. You can also have, I guess this is one large, two medium and eight small. Let me check that. Yeah, one large, two medium and eight small. If you want all of your textures of the same size, if they are actually of the same size, then you can select something like 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4. You can also have one texture, just if it's just a single texture. Okay, one last thing I want to show you is this, the 50 mm zoom. I think you would use this for a camera, uh, sort of like as if you're looking through a camera and you're looking at a very bright light. Let me use this instead of the sun flare. Okay, so you can see these circles over here. These are all in this texture sheet. All of these are being used in this lens flare, and this is just one of the many examples of how useful lens flare is. You can create your own effect, you can create your own textures and your own texture sheet, and you can create your own lens flares as well for whatever effect you want. So yeah, this is how you use lens flares. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Do check out these other videos as well. The video on the top left teaches you about layers and layer masking. The video on the top right teaches you about fixing object rotation, and the video on the bottom left teaches you how to use a wheel collider. I'm also accepting donations, so if you would like to help me out, you can send your donations to my PayPal email address, which is mentioned on the screen and in the description down below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.
Is he even still the same? Claiming Lord's boys, but we never seen him main. Out on cover, now on album when he get the chance to hang. Like, damn, 134. Niggas acting like I never been through them doors. Moved uptown and I rocked a little red. Niggas asking if I'm raw cause I'm out in Hempstead. Like, shit, who are you? Entourage member or